Morning guys, how you going? Oh god, that was so Australian. I've been here too long already. Good morning guys, I hope you're well. Today is kind of an impromptu day off for me. I was supposed to be working, but I've been given the day free, so I thought I would take the opportunity and try and be productive and do a little video on things I wish I had known, such things I think would be useful for people to know if you're thinking of moving to Australia. Also, I want to go over the elephant in the room. I am wearing a bikini top, yes, but it's because it's, well, it looks cloudy and horrible outside, but it is really warm and stuffy and humid. So I had put on a cute t-shirt, but it was, even before I started filming, it was really hot and sweaty. So we're going with the bikini top, I'm afraid. So obviously I'm filming this in early 2018, and I'm guessing this is kind of a given, but just in case, depending on when you're watching this, all of the rules and all of what I'm about to speak about might not be relevant anymore. Things might have changed. This is just from my experience and what was relevant to me and having moved over from the UK. So if you're moving over from Gibraltar or the States or Bangladesh or wherever, it might not apply to you, but I'm gonna just give you all the information that I have and that I've experienced, in the hopes that it helps you and gives you kind of thoughts of what to look into if not. So in about the beginning of October 2017, so October last year, I decided that I was going to look into moving to Australia on a working holiday visa, which is a visa subclass 417, I believe, just because I wanted a bit of change of scenery, and you know, it's such a great place for young persons, as they say, to come over and experience it and to be able to work. And I kind of wanted to see a bit more of this side of the world. I've only ever been really to Europe, so I wanted to see more of this side of the world, and it's all on your doorstep. Nothing's horribly far. So I thought it would be great if I can work for a couple of months while I'm there, see a bit of Australia, Sydney, enjoy myself, travel up and down the Australian coast, and then have enough money still saved, or still be earning enough money to then travel a bit more after, before I go back to the UK eventually. So I applied for my Australian working holiday visa online, just via, I think it was like the Australian gov. I was going to say .uk, but I can either put the link here or I'll link it down below. But I applied online, and I think it cost about $440 when I did it, or about £270-ish. That could be way off base, but it was thereabouts as far as money went, which on the one hand is a lot of money to pay in one chunk. On the other hand, like, that is your cost to be allowed to be in Australia for a whole year. I applied online on, I think, a Sunday night or something like that, thinking it was going to take about a week for anyone to even acknowledge it, and then another week for it to go through, and then loads of little loopholes. It literally came through about 20 minutes later saying it was approved, which I was really surprised about. And I didn't believe it because I thought it's all happened quite quickly. There must be some like little small print thing that I haven't read somewhere that tells me I've got to do X, Y, and Z before my visa is actually official. But no, I literally applied online. They must do a quick check on you on their end. I don't know what happens their end, but it came through quite quickly, which meant that like the following morning, if I had wanted to, I could have then gotten up, boarded a flight to Australia, and started my working holiday. So as far as working holiday visas go, to my knowledge, you are allowed 1 year on those, with an opportunity to extend for a second year if you do, I think, farm work, or like you're a tree surgeon or whatever. But to be able to extend for a second year, you do need to do that 3-month or 88 days worth of farm work. I think for Americans there's a possibility you might actually be able to go up to like one of the northern territories and do hospitality work for 3 months instead, but weirdly I don't think that's an option for Brits, and I haven't confirmed that. So if you're from the States and you're watching this and you're thinking of doing that, definitely look into that further, please. But that's just what I've heard from a few American friends, that might be an option for them if they want to continue for a second year. So from the day your visa is issued, you have a year after that to enter the country, and then from the date you enter the country you have a further year. If you're working, to the best of my knowledge, there is not a limit on how many hours you can work or how many jobs you can work. Like, you could literally have 6 jobs going and be working 150 hours a week if you so please, and and that's great on the one hand because you can earn out more, but obviously you get taxed more with that as well. But to get a job, you'll also need a tax file number. Again, I applied for that online, so you literally just fill out an application form with like your address and your personal details, and then the rest is sorted out for you. And in the post, you should get a tax file number, which is just something you'll need to put on any form. It's a bit like a national insurance number in the UK. Also, be very mindful of how much you're getting taxed. Obviously, because of the kind of visa you'll be taxed differently to how locals are taxed, but it's definitely something to keep in mind, because if you don't get taxed correctly, you could then be subject to fines, and in fact, law in general is taken very seriously in Australia, so definitely if you can avoid fines of any kind, that would be fab. I decided to work in hospitality just because I thought it would be quite sociable hours, and it's always quite a sociable environment, I find. But again, like, there's no limit to what you can do. Well, the only limit as far as work goes is that while you're on a working holiday visa, you can only work for 6-month periods at a time in one job. So you can work at Domino's the minute you get here, as well as a library and a cinema and whatever, but you can only work in any of those roles for 6 months, and then you have to change. Like, for whatever reason, the law will not allow you to stay in one role for more than 6 months unless you happen to get sponsored, in which case you're a very lucky being. Although from what I've heard, sponsorship is about 17,000 Australian dollars for a company to do, so I wouldn't hold your breath on getting sponsored unless someone happens to think you're the cat's pajamas. In my experience, I found it quite easy to sort of find a job. Before I'd come over to Australia, I'd kind of sussed out, just using Instagram and web searches and things like that, a bunch of places that I thought would be kind of nice to work and what areas they were in. Approached them before I came, and then sent them copies of my resume and or went in to speak to somebody when I arrived. So I did a couple of trial shifts here and there, which normally are like a few hours long depending on where you're doing them. So I did a couple of trial shifts and then got offered roles, and that was all fine. So now I'm working, I think I work anything from like 26 to 45 hours a week depending on how my week goes. On the one hand, doing like hospitality or casual work or retail is super chill because it means you've got like evenings free and stuff. For most bar jobs and hospitality work, you'll probably need an RSA, which if you've been watching my Dear Mum Diaries, you'll know that that is a nightmare to do. So an RSA is a responsible server of alcohol. I believe that's what it stands for, I should probably know. But it's basically like an alcohol qualification you need before you're allowed to work in any bar or hospitality job or anywhere that serves alcohol. You can either go in for like a one-day class and do it there, which takes about 6 or 7 hours, or you can do it online, which also takes about 6 or 7 hours. And then eventually, assuming you do it correctly, you'll get your qualification through, and then it's done and dusted, and you're free to serve beers, wines, whatever you fancy. But basically you will be needing an RSA. If you're in New South Wales, I think it cost me $120 to do the qualification, which is kind of expensive. On the other hand, I think if you're in some of the other states, it's much cheaper, like $40, but for some reason New South Wales is more spenny. Great. Medicare. If you're from the UK, you are hopefully, what is the slide? Okay, we're gonna just roll with it. If you're from the UK, you are hopefully eligible for Medicare, which is basically where if you are sick and you have to have any kind of medical treatment, you do have to pay a cost in Australia, but the government will give you some of that money back. I had to go to one of the government offices in Sydney, which I think my nearest one is in Darlinghurst. Top tip, if you're gonna go right at the crack of dawn, like before it opens. So if they open at 8:30, be there at 8:15 because it gets super busy super quickly. I went really early in the morning and I was in and out within 15 minutes. All the paperwork is done. Just make sure you take like ID, copies of any visa paperwork and things with you. And if you have an address by that point, definitely take proof of address with you, etc, etc. In fact, just take all the paperwork you could possibly ever need to the government office with you, and they'll sort out the Medicare forms for you. I don't think you're eligible for it if you're from the States or if you're from certain other countries, but if you're coming from the UK, that is something that might be a massive help to you. so definitely worth looking into and signing up for when you get here. So the other day I went to the doctor's, it came to $120. I know, expensive, right? And then I think the government refunded me just under $40, which came through that same afternoon. So I mean, I was still out of pocket about $80-ish, and then I had to pay $15 for my prescription on top of that. But just to kind of give you an idea, finding a house, or a flat, I guess. So when I moved to Australia, loads of people pointed me in the direction of flatmates.com.au, and that's where I looked, and that's where I found the place I'm currently living in. There are also loads of Facebook groups. So someone was telling me about, there's a Facebook group called Irish Around Sydney, which is basically people from the UK, Ireland, Europe, wherever in fact, all just coming together in a big Facebook community to kind of share tips and post house ads and so on and so forth. So that's really helpful. But there's loads of Facebook groups going. Loads of people I know have been looking on Gumtree and been quite successful there. But flatmates.com.au is one that I've heard about a lot and that has been quite successful for me and for people that I know. Depending on where you want to live and whether you're willing to share a room, I would say anything between $250 and $300 a week is probably what you're likely to be looking at if you're in Sydney. Obviously, living in different states and different areas, it'll be different costs and cheaper. But for Sydney, I found most people I know who have a private room are about $250 to $300, depending on how close to the city centre they're living. So I think depending on where you're wanting to live and how, like, I have a friend who lives out right near Bondi Beach, but she's in a shared room and she's paying, I think, about 250 Australian dollars a week to live there, and that's for like 2 beds in obviously 1 room. I live on the northern side of Sydney, but I'm right near one of the beaches, so like I'm a 5 or 10 minute walk from the beach. I have a private room, as you can see, and it's about $290 a week, so it's all relative. I'm slightly further out from the city, but I'm still close to the beach, and actually even to get into the city is about 15 minutes on a bus if there's no traffic. So all in all, it's not too bad. It just kind of depends on whereabouts you want to be, but that's definitely something to bear in mind. Most people I've spoken to are in a similar sort of ballpark figure, unless obviously they live with like friends or family or have like discounted rates for whatever reason. Some people obviously pay a lot more, some people pay less, but it's just something to kind of have in your mind as like a rough roundabout figure. I think the only other thing left to cover is probably bank accounts. It's relatively easy to set up a bank account, but you'll probably need a permanent address, and then obviously like forms of ID and stuff with you before you do so. Some of my friends are with Commonwealth, some of them are with Westpac, I think it's called. I've chosen to go for ANZ just because I've heard good things about them. So I went in, just said I'm like you would at Barclays or HSBC or whatever, filled out some paperwork, and that was all kind of mostly done for me by the, is it called a clerk or a clerk? I don't know. But the young gentleman in the bank did most of the hard work for me. I just kind of filled out the paperwork that needed to be filled out. I think I got my bank card about 5 days later, but because I didn't have a permanent address at that point, it got sent to the bank and I went to go pick it up. So that's all relatively straightforward, and then obviously anything I get paid will go into that account while I'm here, which is much easier than transferring and paying fees to use international cards in Australia. Another thing to also be mindful is they have superannuation here, which is basically like a mandatory pension scheme. And at the moment, I think about 10% of whatever your wage or salary is will go into that. So if you earn £10,000 a month, $10,000 a month, $1,000 of that will automatically go into that superannuation account. If you're only here for a working holiday visa, when you leave, obviously you're not going to need said superannuation, so you can then fill out a bunch of forms to claim that back, from what I understand. So on the one hand, if you are going to stay in Australia or looking to get sponsored and want to stay here long term, that's great, because then you've got money constantly going into that account for when you're older or for later on in life. If you're not, although that money will be coming out of your paycheck every week or 2 weeks or month or whatever, which is not ideal, when you leave, that will have effectively worked like a savings account, so you should hopefully get all of that back. Well, a chunk of it, if not all of it. I think that just about covers everything that I wanted to know and that I was bombarding people with questions about before I moved to Australia, and hopefully it's helped some of you guys if you're thinking of moving to Australia yourselves. I'll put as many links to useful things down in the description box below, but feel free to give me a follow on Instagram. I'm at Rosina, and comment below if you have any other questions or there's things I haven't covered. But like I said, I'm sure you can find a chunk of this online and through other people you might know who've moved to Australia as well. This is just a starting point to kind of cover as many topics as I could think of that I had questions about. Until next time, see ya!